Mostly, I don't like to preach on patience because every time I get ready to preach on patience, God gives me opportunities to practice what I preach. It's like that old story where someone says, I made the mistake of praying for patience that morning, and then I spent 2 hours in traffic on my way to the office. I am never praying for patience again. I think we all feel like that with patience, but we all need it, don't we? We all are looking for patience in our lives. But what is patience exactly? Well, different authors have spoken of it in a variety of ways. Let me share some of my favorites. One author put it this way: patience is self-restraint, which does not hastily retaliate against a wrong. Another said, patience is the ability to accept delay or disappointment graciously. I like this third one. Patience is a calm endurance based on the certain knowledge that God is in control. If I had to define patience, I'd say patience is basically waiting in expectation, waiting with perseverance. And so today I want to talk about this. I want to talk about patience with you. And I want to talk about it, I think some of what we regularly talk about when we talk about patience, but I really want to look at it from a spiritual perspective. And then I want to talk about how patience is really connected to love. Let's start with thinking about where we're at with patience in our own lives. So, are you a patient person? If we asked the people you live with, what would they say? What would your family say? What would your dog say? If you gave yourself a score, 1, you're not patient at all, 10, you're super patient, where would you fall? I think for a marriage to be successful, one of the people in the marriage has to be very patient. In my marriage, that would not be me. When I think of patience, and I think of it in our cultural context, I think patience is how we often talk about waiting, right? When our kids are little, we teach them to be patient for the summer to come, to be patient for dessert, to be patient and let others have their turn. When we become adults, we have other things we wait for. I think we are patient to let people have their say or to finish telling their story. We are patient for going on our vacation. We are patient, hoping that things come together. COVID-19, though, has given us lots of opportunities to exercise what little or much patience we have. And it turns out we are not very good at being patient. I'm sure you've noticed that the numbers for COVID are rising in the United States. And it is no surprise that waiting and being patient and delaying gratification is not something we're good at. In fact, people would say that we're actually pretty bad at it. Why? Well, I think for some of us, we would say that the reason we're not patient is because we're selfish. Maybe. Others would say the reason we're not patient is because patience is hard. Possibly. I think it depends on us, right? Depends on who we are and where patience becomes an issue in our own lives. I think one reason that patience is a challenge, especially now, is that many times when we talk about being patient, we're talking about waiting for something that we think is coming to us. And so in the case of COVID, we're waiting for things to get back to normal. But as we live in this time, maybe patience is something completely different. Maybe patience is asking something different out of you and I. Recently, I finished the book, Broken Places and Outer Spaces by Nnedi Okorafor. The author tells the story of her early life and how she was an athletic college athlete. But she was born with, as were her family, the issue of scoliosis. And so she, like her siblings, had to have surgery. Now, it was a surgery that had a really high success rate, and so no one was super worried. But she did not come through the surgery well. And she lost movement in her legs. This changed her life. And I think she would say that it actually changed her life for the better. Now, eventually, she did regain her ability to walk. But during her recovery, a creative new door was opened in her life. Something completely unexpected to her. And if you know of her at all, it's because you like science fiction. She is a well-known, famous science fiction author. Did she want her surgery to go awry? Of course not. Because as she dealt with the surgery and its aftermath, she struggled. She lost her way. She lost her identity. But eventually, something new was born in her. Eventually, she was made more than who she originally was. As I reflect on her story and what we're going through with COVID, I wonder if patience isn't about waiting, which is often passive. I wonder if patience is about the practice of learning to make space for something new to happen. Let me say that again. I wonder if patience is the practice of learning to make space for something new to happen. This is a different kind of way of thinking of patience, and I say this because a lot of times when we talk about being patient, it really is about we're being patient for what we think is coming to us, and it's something we have a good sense of what it is. I mean, sure, there are times when we have to wait, but we usually have some sense of what it is we're waiting for, what it is we need to be patient about. But what if we are called in this time of COVID not to return to what was, but to, in fact, be patient for what is being born anew, for what God is doing in a new way, for the new world that is coming, that is here, even if we know nothing about it. I think this is some of what the spirituality of patience looks like. Here, patience becomes a practice, not something that's a practice like we have to practice waiting, but it becomes this kind of practice where we take a stance in the midst of these times so that what is new, what might be born, what might come, what might find us is able to happen so that we are open and ready for the future, even if we don't know what it is. This is a strange world we live in these days. And I think that if we are honest, most of us are not very patient. We are suffering. We are not trusting. We are not hopeful. And the challenges of it all can feel very overwhelming. I think in many ways it feels as if the ground that we are on is shaking and we don't know what it is that will make things better. So when we talk about the spirituality of patience, I want us to hear today's text, which speaks to us about fruitfulness and where our fruitfulness always begins. This is one of my favorites. This is John 15, 1 through 11, and Jeff will read it for us.
A reading from John, chapter 15. Jesus said, "I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine grower. He removes every branch in me that bears no fruit. Every branch that bears fruit, he prunes to make it bear more fruit. You have already been cleansed by the word that I have spoken to you. Abide in me as I abide in you. Just as the branch cannot bear fruit by itself, unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who abide in me and I in them bear much fruit, because apart from me you can do nothing. Whoever does not abide in me is thrown away like a branch and withers. Such branches are gathered, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you abide in me, and my words abide in you, ask for whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. My Father is glorified by this, that you bear much fruit and become my disciples. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments, and I abide in his love. I have said these things to you, so that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be complete." The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
Every time I hear that text, it just lets me take kind of a deep breath. You know, it is a text that is talking about fruitfulness. Did you catch that in all of the images that it uses? As we talk about the fruit of the Spirit, we're talking too about what it means to be fruitful. And this text has for us kind of the foundation of where fruitfulness springs from. Did you hear it? In the text it says we are to be connected to Jesus as the vine, and connected to the Father as the vine grower. In other words, from the text perspective, we don't bear fruit of love and joy and peace and patience outside of a relationship with God. I think this feels especially true as we talk about patience. And I say that because when we talk about love and joy and peace, I think those are things that all of us want to experience, right? We all want to think and feel and act in those ways. But when we talk about patience, I think most of us know we need it, but we'd rather not be in situations where we need to exercise it, right? As we talk about the spirituality of patience, we're talking about today We're talking about trusting God. We're talking about making space within our own hearts and lives so that something new can be born. Patience here is not passive. Patience here is an active practice. And it's a practice that we're called to do that I think is hard. It's a calling in this time. It takes work for us. It takes work for us to be connected daily to God and to keep going back to that connection throughout the day. It's a challenge to trust in the midst of all that's going on. It's a challenge to believe that something new is going to come. Something new will come out of this time. Even if we don't know or control what it is. We are in a season, I think, of patience, and we need to look to God, not to our past, not to what was, not to this make-believe future where everything will go back to how it used to be. And this will take a lot from us to live in this in-between space, to look to God instead of back or forward. How do we do that? How do we gain that strength? Well, we talked about it a little bit right at the beginning of our series, because we talked about how all of these fruit, we don't call them the fruits of the Spirit, we call it the fruit of the Spirit. And some Bible scholars think that's because love is really the only fruit, and all the rest of these are expressions of love. So, how is patience connected to love? I've been thinking about it. And I think to me, it kind of looks like this. If I am patient and become more open to what is next, open to what is new, for me to hold that space in my heart, in my mind, in my life, I need to trust that God's love is what makes all of this possible. I need to hold this space in me because I think that's what this next chapter of our lives is about. But I can only do that with a sense of hope, with a sense of promise and opportunity, because I know that God loves us, because I know that God has a future for us, because I know that God desires to meet us and make all of this new. Toward the end of the book, Broken Places and Outer Spaces, the author talks about as she learned to walk again, she started to drive too, and how she had some trouble with driving. Her brain wasn't always communicating to her feet. And so when she would drive, she would have to really look at her feet and be conscious of that. And when she looked, it let everything kind of connect up. And this worked great in the daytime. But at night, she got in trouble. And in fact, she almost got in an accident because even though her brain was telling her legs to press the brake, it didn't happen. And so she was very creative. She bought a flashlight. She turned the light on and kept it in the car with her and shone it on her legs so that as she was driving, her brain and her eyes and her legs could all sync up and she could know how to put the gas and the brakes on, even when it was dark Right now, we are in a dark time. People are not doing well. People are not caring. People are angry. People are worried. People are anxious. The world feels so uncertain. And I think we all are looking for a light. God offers us that light today. God is our light. God meets us, and God invites us to lean into Him in the midst of this time, that He would be the light that would guide us and would connect all of these pieces and our very disjointed world. God calls us to develop the fruit of patience for all that is yet to be. And we need to know that He is depending on us. He's depending on us to be open. He's depending on us to be trusting. He's depending on us to depend on Him, to look to Him as our light and as the one who's going to connect all of this crazy mess together. So here's some things you can work on today to live into this a little more. First, slow down and be curious. We all need to slow down. It goes fast and crazy. We need to reflect. We need to think. Take space to think. Take space to process all of this and to think, who do I want to be? How do I want to live in the midst of all of this? We need to ask ourselves, questions like, where is God actually calling us? Not in the past, but right now. Where is God calling us now? Then maybe the question like, what really matters in this time? So often we drag with us the things that matter from the past. What matters now? What would God have us doing? And what do we just need to leave behind? Number 2, up your prayer game. Now, I am a great proponent of short, sweet prayers that you can say throughout the day. And how I recommend you do this is like the cheat sheet of it all. It's on your phone. There are alarms. They're called alarms. You can actually rename them. So here's some things you might rename them. Show me the new thing you're doing. That's a great simple prayer. Light my way in these dark times. Super great. Make space in me to trust you. All simple, simple prayers that you can do and remind yourself. Put it on a Post-it. Put it on your mirror. Simple ways that you connect to the hope and the patience that God is growing in us. And number 3, which may be the hardest for most of us, lower your expectations. Are you dealing with impatience right now because you have an unrealistic expectation of this year, of yourself, of others who are all just trying to figure it out too? Maybe you did not get the memo, but this year is going to be different. All those great goals you set up at the beginning of the year, they may or may not apply. Things are very different this year, and how we respond needs to change, needs to be different. This is a new way of life that God is birthing. We don't know for how long or what it will look like, right? We need to lower our expectations. That doesn't mean not have any. right? It means kind of look at what we're expecting. Are we looking for it all to work together like tomorrow? Lower your expectations. Let me close with this. The Spirit gives us the fruit of patience so that we can leave behind our fear and our negativity and whatever else drags us down, and so that we might find hope and trust and love. So know today that God desires to birth in you a new understanding of patience, one that is about opening up space in your life for what may come that you know nothing about, because God desires you to be fruitful and fruitful with the fruit of patience. Let's pray. Loving and holy God, we just breathe in this